listening to a interview of an old second story guy, an old breaking and entering guy. He would break into people's houses and steal stuff. And the interview, he was telling the interviewer that it's not really worth it to do breaking and entering anymore. And there's no more B&E. Because that's why it's not as, people still do it, but it's not very profitable because people don't really own anything that's worth stealing. Our ideas of wealth have changed. How many of us have silverware in our house? Almost none of us, right? How many of us have like fine china and crystal? Those are kind of non sequiturs for most people. All over the world, that doesn't really compute for most of us, right? So our idea of wealth has changed. And this is actually timely that I'm thinking about this, because yesterday somebody asked the question of, well, is there a pathway to wealth? That doesn't involve ripping everybody off and running a goddamn Ponzi scheme, because everything right now has turned into a fucking Ponzi scheme. It's really goddamn annoying. And the idea is, so it's a great question, and I thought about it all day yesterday, how I wanted to answer this. And so I think I've come up with an answer. And the first thing we have to do is define, like, what do we mean by wealth? How do we want to define that? So I'll give you my definition of wealth, of what I consider to be spectacularly wealthy by comparison to the entire world. So we're not just going to talk about American way of life, and we're going to eliminate the extremes. So the Bezoses or Bezai of the world, they're on vacation on this one, because those are anomalies in the wealth idea. We're talking about the wealth that is actually attainable in one's lifetime, that is statistically probable. Fair enough? Okay. So what I consider to be spectacularly wealthy goes something like this. Let's say that you, and I've been over this before, but we're going to review this. You own your house, you own your car, and you own your property, and you own all of your personal effects, and you don't have any debt, and you don't have any taxes that are due. So there's no income taxes, no property taxes, no death taxes. In other words, the three things that are in the Communist Manifesto. None of that. And we haven't even gone into your income. You just own that stuff, right? And you own it yourself. And then on top of that, we're going to add two other things. And that is not having to ask permission and not having to ask for forgiveness. So those two things. Now, those two things were what the founders of the country thought were really huge. That was their big deal, is not having to ask permission and not having to ask for forgiveness. So not having to apologize for being human, for existing, for being here. Okay, so common sense, common law is derivative of common sense. And common law said that, well, okay, hey, listen, if nobody's using this land, because we have to go to a land discussion, because once again, we're back into that, because that's the part of the deal. It's like, well, how do you own land, and how do you have a house, and so on. Remember, homelessness and houselessness are mutually exclusive things. They are not the same thing. Okay, so you having a home versus you having a dwelling are two different topics of conversation. Homelessness shouldn't exist. That's not a thing. That should not be a thing in any country, not just Western countries, but any countries. Now, what do I mean by homelessness? I mean having a place in which, to go, someplace to go. Not a dwelling necessarily, not a building, not a structure of some kind. That's on you. So in other words, you find a piece of land that nobody's using and say, okay, hey, listen, nobody's using this. I'm going to fence this off, and this is mine now. I'm going to own this as private property. By the way, that's what the founders had in mind, not this whole idea of investment properties. This is actually a big problem. In the West in particular, the idea of an investment property has caused enormous amounts of problems in the U.S. in particular. It's a huge Ponzi scheme here now. And where the idea is, well, I'm just going to buy land and hold on to it. That's not supposed to be a thing, just so you know. If you're going to buy it and you're going to use it, you're going to do something with it in terms of utility, sure. If you're not going to do anything with it and just hold it as a place to park money, no, that shouldn't be a thing. I would look you in the eye and tell you, no, you shouldn't do that. And not only should you not do that, you should have the same fate that happened to, a lot of the Indians as a result of that. And I'm not going to apologize for that. I know I'm going to offend a bunch of people with that. I don't give a fuck about you're offended. Fuck you, okay? The claim that, like, for example, Sitting Bull's claim of, like, this is all ours. Okay, all right, fine, it's all yours. Where are the borders? Well, no, it's all. No, you don't get to say that. You don't get to say that you're the king of Earth and that you're like, okay, the entire planet is my private estate and you're all trespassing, so you should all leave, that's bullshit. Human beings are, in fact, a part of the Earth's mass, okay? So there's no way around that. And they're going to go somewhere. Now, if you're already there and you're like, well, hey, this is my land here and here are my borders, okay, well, that's a different story, right? This is where borders come from. This is where loser-tardians don't, it's why I can't go down the road with libertarians any longer, because, like, the idea, like, no borders, but they want borders, but they don't want borders. They don't even know what the fuck they want. They're like talking to a 6-year-old. So this whole idea is that, well, okay, if you're going to do this and say, okay, well, this is mine, okay, well, that's fine. Okay, then that means I can go over here and you're going to leave me alone. I'm going to build my house and I'm going to have my family, and I'm going to leave you alone and you're going to leave me alone. But we can help each other. We can agree, but we're going to effectively be separate. Okay, so that's where we have to attack this idea of is there a pathway to wealth? So that was the question. Is there a pathway to wealth? Like, okay, so if we define wealth as being able to having your own place, no debt, and your vehicle, and you don't have banks chasing you down all the time, because they printed a bunch of money to fucking worthlessness, right? And you have a whole shit ton of shills, Dave Ramsey and others out there shilling for all these banks, that's all they are. Krugman, they're all the same fucking people. They all share a brain as far as I'm concerned. So this kind of thing, like, okay, well then, if you're going to have a civilization like that, and you're going to say that that's the kind of wealth that we're after, and we're not having to ask for permission and not have to ask for forgiveness, well, that's the U.S. in 1776. Okay, that's the U.S. after, actually post-Revolutionary War. That's the U.S. And how did you become a landowner back then? You went west, right? Old Horace Greeley quote, go west, young man. That's where that comes from, because you just went about 10 miles west. I've covered this a long time ago. But you just went a little bit further west, and there was nobody out there. So you're like, well, okay, is there anybody here? No. Okay, well, I'm going to fence this off, and this is going to be mine. Or you could have the outlaw Josie Wales conversation, where it's like the war of words, war of peace, or words of war and words of peace conversation, right? Where the natives, you're like, hey, listen, we're going to live here and we're going to be peaceful, if we can be, and you're welcome to some of our game. You're welcome to to share in this with us, and we'll leave you alone. That's a fair conversation. There is plenty of room for people. This idea of the investment property thing has to be addressed, and so the question being, is there a path to that kind of wealth? So, since I give you the definition, my definition of wealth, which is not just staring at a phone all day long and saying I'm rich because I have a $1,000 iPhone. No, actual wealth, which is property ownership and your ability to go to a home that you have, not a dwelling necessarily, that's on you, but a place for you to go that you're not going to be run off by somebody else. I consider that to be spectacularly wealthy. Now, is there a path to that? Yes, there is. You're not going to like it, because it means getting rid of, it means getting rid of a lot of fake wealth. See, real wealth always trumps fake wealth. The problem is that you have so many people now that believe in fake wealth. They don't understand the idea of real wealth anymore. They're too far gone. Like 90% of boomers, for example, are too far gone. They have no fucking clue what real wealth actually is. They know what fake wealth is. A good chunk of Gen X is in the same boat. Almost everybody who, the old ditto head, right-wing people have no fucking clue what real wealth is, because what I just described is actually something real and tangible, right? And you can quantify it, you can measure all of that. But like, no, we need to have people working in these factories. Yeah, that's the thing. We need to have people, that's how it always works and stuff. This is not a leftist idea, by the way. At least not from my perspective, because it's like, well, okay, let's have an honest economy. Let's have a free market, which means that you could fail. Right? It doesn't guarantee you succeed. It doesn't mean that anybody shows up at your company and actually works, right? It doesn't mean that you have to entice them there. You have to offer them more than they would get doing nothing. That's the difference. So let's have a free market. I'm all about that, but that just means that banks fail, all these big companies fail, all this shit goes away. Once again, the purge of fake wealth. So that's the first part. The first high hurdle is deciding what is real wealth. I would say we start there.